Hi, I'm Mimi Chan. Welcome to Culture Chat. Thanks for joining the conversation. Representative Anna Eskamani is an Orlando native and daughter of Iranian immigrants. She's the first Iranian-American to serve in the Florida Legislature. She has been a lifelong community builder and was elected to serve the great people of Florida State House District 47 in November of 2018. Today, we discuss hot topics like Planned Parenthood, Title X, affordable housing, and what each of us can do to make a difference. I loved meeting Anna, and she is quite an inspiration, so I hope you enjoy the conversation. As a reminder, my views on politics are my own and do not affect my position at work. Finally, please help support this podcast by sharing and rating it. If you'd like to support with a donation, you can become a patron for as little as $1 per month by visiting my website or patreon.com. For comments or suggestions, email me at mimi@culturechatpodcast.com or reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Anna, thank you so much for joining me on Culture Chat today.
I'm so excited. Thanks for inviting me.
This isn't going to go live, so it won't be for a few weeks, but today is actually International Women's Day.
It sure is.
Yes.
What a perfect time to be together.
It is a perfect time because you and I actually have a lot in common. We are both daughters of immigrants, and we are both women in a male-dominated industry.
Sure are, and we both went to University High School at UCF.
Yes, go Cougars, go Knights. When I saw all of this, I'm like, oh, this is kismet. We are meant to meet today.
Kismet.
So I am so psyched. And of course, I saw you and met you briefly at the Dragon Asia Trend Parade for Chinese New Year, and you were out there supporting our culture, which was so wonderful. But also, all of the good things that you've been doing for Florida is definitely noted, and congratulations, of course, for being the first Iranian-American female representative for Florida. We are so proud of that fact, and have always been rooting for you. But I want to kind of just go back to the beginning. Like, what did you want to be when you grew up?
That's such a great question. It's for so many immigrants too. I will tell you, I know for our family, politics was not an option for us. I mean, my dad in particular really wanted me to go into engineering,
doctor,
medicine, exactly,
lawyer, doctor, engineer.
Exactly. Those are your options. Those are all your options. And so for actually my sister and myself, we kind of found it through a very organic evolution. I mean, my first ever effort at collecting petitions was when I was 10 years old. My classmate was being moved to a different lunch period, and I refused to let that happen.
Well, how dare they?
How dare they? I know, all politics are local. So I launched a petition drive to keep her in my class so we could still have lunch together, and it actually didn't work out. I lost that campaign, but I never started organizing for a cause that I cared about.
Okay, so this has been instilled for a while.
Absolutely. And I think part of it too is your immigrant identity, because for me, like, I always knew that I was different, and not necessarily in a way that was good, right? I mean, especially after 9/11 happened, that's when I really started experiencing racism and just being treated differently because of the color of my skin, because I had my appearance, and that was really tough to navigate. But it also put me to a place of finding resilience and knowing that that's not okay. Like, we all should be treated equally, no matter what we look like, who we love, how much money we make. And so at an early age too, these values around equality and justice were kind of, being formed without me even knowing that's really what it was.
Yeah, and it does sound like also, of course, your parents had a huge part to play in that. And
absolutely.
Unfortunately, I know that you lost your mom at a very young age, and so that challenge must have made you the stronger woman you are now. But I mean, I can see that, the work ethic they both had.
Totally.
You definitely have
such a good point.
Inherited that.
It's such a good point. I mean, all I know is my family working. That my parents were working 24/7. My dad went to UCF in '94. Actually, he got a degree in electrical engineering. On the weekdays, would work on the Space Coast. On the weekends, worked at Walt Disney World as a customer service rep. And then our mom worked at Kmart her entire life. And as you mentioned, she was diagnosed with cancer when I was about 10 years old, and passed away in 2004. After a long battle, and that loss is really what grounds me every day in honoring those who are no longer with us through action. I care so deeply about women and girls in particular because I lost my mom at a young age, and I don't want anyone else to have to go through that. I want people to reach their fullest potential and to be able to live life with one another for as long as possible and not have to experience the loss that I have.
Yeah, and I mean, unfortunately though, for whatever reason, a lot of us will
have to go through these losses or go through these challenges. Like, what advice would you give a 13-year-old, and then even as an adult?
Oh my gosh.
Because you have so much to share.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. What a question. Like, if I could go back and even talk to like 13-year-old Anna, right? Like, what would I say? I mean, I think I would tell her that she is so strong, and not to undermine her own strength. Like, you know, find comfort in the fact that, yes, you only knew mom for 13 years, but she gave you so much in that time, and to, you know, realize that you have the strength to carry on. And for any other girl going through that type of trauma, to just really, really don't forget your authentic self. Like, don't let others tell you to be something you're not. And I think for many young girls, especially girls of color, you know, there's an environment around us where we're forced to express more of a mainstream identity, right? There's pressures to express whiteness and pressure to look a certain way and act a certain way, because we're trying to fit in. And I would tell every girl, just no matter who you are, just be yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's such a beautiful message, especially now, being that we are a spectrum of colors here in the United States, and that is the point. We are supposed to be the melting pot and the land of the free and the American dream. You know, my father and my mother both came with the same dream. You know, like coming here, building a new life. You know, leaving poverty and oppression behind. So
absolutely.
But you know, it is unfortunate though, because when we grow up, and you know, like you, a little earlier, decades-wise, we're both alumni of the same high school. But it frustrates me, because I did feel a lot of that, you know, growing up, where especially in Florida, I'm definitively the minority. You know, I was definitely like the one out of the 30 or 40 at the school that was like not in my grade, right? And so for me, I'm like, okay, you know, during that era, right? But then you're telling me, like, even in, you know, 2004, you know, you're still.
Well, I'll tell you, even the Florida Legislature 2019, you know, you walk in and it's still majority male, it's majority white. I mean, and yet the state of Florida is so diverse, and, you know, half of our population is women, but the legislature, though it has improved, it's still substantially very different from what the state actually looks and feels like.
Yeah, and that's where my frustration always lies. You know, I always tell people, well, I started this podcast in 2016 for some reason, and because this is a little bit separate of my, you know, as a profession, I'm a Kung Fu teacher, and I have a very specific role there, and of course, at our school, like, everyone is welcome, and it's very bipartisan there, but like, I wanted to have kind of a voice outside of that role, and this became that voice, and
I'm glad you're doing it.
So
because, you know, what's something just really magical about what you're doing too, I have to say, is that you're creating your own medium to tell stories that oftentimes are never heard, right? And so to create a space for that to happen, it's just incredible, and I'm really humbled to be a part of it.
Well, it's awesome, because then I get a chance to meet with you and have some time, and then, you know, we can connect. But it is true, you know, I look at the time periods and I think, wow, you know, so much quote unquote progress has been made, but it's just not even enough. We're not even close to where we want to be. And in terms of all the organizations, I know you've worked with Planned Parenthood, and you do a lot of outside work with different communities and outreach programs, and I'm a big supporter of Planned Parenthood, and so, you know, like Power Pink and all that. And you know, I want to definitely talk about all the goals you have for Florida in general, because I know this is like all thrown into your lap. Like, you know, I know it's only been a few months, but I am sure you have hit the ground running. And it's been nonstop, because you have a lot of work to do.
We do.
But the thing I wanted to ask you, because you have such extensive experience in Planned Parenthood, is, you know, it just garners so much controversy. And I mean, even today, like, you turn on the news and podcasts and everything, I'm reading about Title X, and you know, and I get very frustrated and passionate. So therefore, whenever I'm talking to someone, I tend to just kind of go, oh, okay, that's what you believe, or that's what you think this is. And you know, let's go through a few things. So one, what are the top few myths and things that people always say about Planned Parenthood that are just absolutely not true?
Yeah, great perspective and great question. So I think the first myth about Planned Parenthood is that all Planned Parenthood does is abortion.
Right.
And that's absolutely false. You know, Planned Parenthood is a reproductive health care provider that provides a range of issues, not just for women, but also all genders. Actually, here in Florida, the affiliate that I worked at, we started providing hormone replacement therapy for the transgender and gender nonconforming community. So we became a safer environment for folks that are transitioning in their gender. Obviously, birth control is a major service at Planned Parenthood alongside STI testing and screening and cancer screenings. But I also want to honor the importance of abortion access. And though abortion is a small part of what Planned Parenthood does, it's also a necessary component of reproductive health. I mean, abortion should remain safe and legal. And we know that it's a really personal decision that should be made between a woman, her family, her doctor, and her faith, and not politicians. And I cannot stress enough, the fact that another myth is that there are public dollars in Florida that go towards abortion. And there's always, this effort to kind of make accusations towards Planned Parenthood. And again, those are false as well. I mean, every public dollar that Planned Parenthood gets has to be so specific to a reimbursement of service. And so in the case of Florida, and I can speak to Florida the best because that's, I worked at Planned Parenthood for 6 years here. First of all, there's not a lot of public dollars because when Governor Bush was in office, he actually defunded Planned Parenthood back then. So Florida has already been through a lot of this rhetoric to begin with. And when that happened, old Title X funding went to the health departments versus directly to Planned Parenthood. So there would be some contracts at a county level. For example, here in Orange County, once upon a time, there was a vasectomy Title X grant. And so for vasectomy patients who went to the health department, they might get referred to Planned Parenthood, then Planned Parenthood will be reimbursed for the service provided for the vasectomy. But in all cases, it has to be a very specific reimbursement. You can't just, no one's giving Planned Parenthood a blank check.
Right, and they think even on a federal level that's happening.
Oh, yeah, no.
There's a line in the federal.
I mean, there's so much reporting. And I'll tell you, you would hope every organization has really good, operational systems in place, to be audited and to make sure they're spending their funds correctly. But especially Planned Parenthood. I mean, in 2015, Governor Rick Scott launched these politically motivated investigations into Planned Parenthood where ACA inspectors showed up out of nowhere across the state. I mean, that's an environment that most nonprofits do not have to live with and navigate, but Planned Parenthood does. And Planned Parenthood knows that there's an effort to dismantle abortion access in the state, so they're going to be extra careful when it comes to providing these services. And I think another myth too is that abortion is not safe. 1 in 4 American women have had an abortion in this country. The rate is on the decline, which is fantastic and grounded in access to contraception, access to sexual health education. But for those women who make that decision, we want, and for women who might one day have to make that decision, they should know that abortion is incredibly safe. Has a 99% safety record by the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, and abortion is actually safer than pregnancy and actually giving birth. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that giving birth is safe too. I want to make sure that every option is safe. And we have a lot of work to do in this state to make sure that if we truly care about women's health and safety, that we're investing in prenatal care, postnatal care, adoption services, supporting teen moms. That's what's so frustrating to me, Mimi, is that we're in a state that is a lot of empty rhetoric around women's health.
Right.
And so if you're going to go ahead and attack abortion, why don't you shift that attention towards all these gaps in services where we can support a woman at any part of her life, whether she is going through adolescence, whether she's considering becoming a mom or going, to the point of menopause, that she has all the services available to her, and we're far from that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of confusion also as to, who goes to Planned Parenthood, and if they don't go there, they could go to their healthcare provider. They don't realize that it's providing a service that a lot of people cannot get anywhere.
I was a Planned Parenthood patient. Because my mom had passed away. I had no one to talk to about birth control or sex ed, dating. And I went to Planned Parenthood. I was 18 years old, walked into the health center by myself, seeking contraception, and left with a method that was right for me.
Right.
So I am one of those 5 American women, and it's so important that it's here for others too.
Absolutely. And one of the things that always frustrates me is people who say, well, why should the government have to fund birth control for somebody? Or why should we, I think taxpayers get into this we thing, like why are we paying for, X, Y, and Z? And like I said, I just get frustrated and angry. So I would look to you for a more eloquent response.
Well, I love it, and it's okay to be angry. Sometimes people need to feel your rage too. I'm a very empathetic person, sometimes even too empathetic. But my response to the why is that investment important? Well, first of all, it saves everyone money. we know that preventative care can reduce the cost of other social services. If people can plan their families and be financially ready to become parents, they're not going to have to, benefit and lean on government support services. So that's my first thought is, if you are fiscally conservative, then you know that access to contraception is a smart way to go. And to your point, Title X was actually created by Republicans. Title X was signed into law by Richard Nixon. And so it was Republicans in the legislature and Congress that supported the access to contraception, especially for low-income women. So this is a Republican foundational piece of legislation, and we should have bipartisan support around it today too.
Absolutely, and that's actually right now, as of today in the news. I mean, it's like one of the things that's definitely being, threatened and
it's all
defunded,
politically
and
motivated.
It
That's
is,
what's so frustrating. It's like you ask Catholic women if they use birth control, the answer will be overwhelmingly yes. I mean, that's the reality, is that for our lived experiences, these are personal experiences and decisions that we make every day.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's so politicized, not only does it hurt women, but it's going to hurt the most vulnerable women. It's always going to hurt low-income women, people of color, those who are in service industry. Like, it's really going to impact the folks who need it the most.
Yeah, I think people also don't, like you said, empathize enough. Because that's always what I talk about on this podcast. I'm like, if we could all just empathize with one another and just like
empathy is my favorite word.
It's big, but let alone bringing children into the world that don't have a place because their parents can't afford to have them, or there's so many other facets, like fiscally as well. Like, it causes like a snowball effect on the economy too.
And I want to make sure that, like, if you want to be a mom, then you can be a mom. Like, I feel that firmly, because I do think that reproductive justice, like as a theoretical concept, it's not just about when to have children, when not to have children. It's also about raising your children in an environment conducive to their health and well-being. And that takes shape in good schools, public transportation, earned sick time. There's so many, just good health insurance for a mom after she gives birth. In Florida, you lose your Medicaid after you give birth. Your kid will have Florida Kid Care, but you as a mother will not have health insurance. I mean, that's blows my mind.
Yes.
Like,
how are you supposed to take care of your child if you don't
take care of yourself? And so that's my commitment. Is I try really hard to I will always fight for abortion access, but I try to expand the perspective of my colleagues who really focus on restricting access to abortion, and try to paint this picture of, listen, there's so many other elements here that you could put your energy towards. You could leave this alone, let it be. Abortion is already heavily regulated in Florida. And I support any standards or guidelines that are based on science to ensure that it's good medicine being provided, good healthcare being provided. Politically motivated restrictions, like, we just leave them out the door, and let's focus on making life better for women and girls.
Yeah, I mean, and not to mention the reason that it was legalized, because so many women were dying and having really, they were they're gonna do them anyway type of thing. So it's
You're absolutely right.
Safety.
You're absolutely right. Oh my gosh, thank you for saying that. I mean, Texas is a good recent example.
Yes.
When all the clinics closed in Texas because of TRAP laws, which stands for Targeted Regulation of Abortion Providers, unique laws that don't ban abortion outright, but focus on restricting the type of doctor who can provide it, the type of health center that can provide it. You saw clinics close across the state and women turning to unsafe means to end a pregnancy.
Yeah.
So and again, who's more directly impacted by this? The poor.
Exactly.
Women of color. Because if you're a person of means, you can fly to New York, you can fly to California and end your pregnancy and come back home. You can't do that if you're a farm worker.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you are if you're a waitress or
it's not
a housekeeper.
Yeah, it's not realistic at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and since we're kind of on the topic of how you're explaining to somebody like a point, what is it like for you out there and up there? Because, fortunately now you're in a house where we have some backing. It's not like, a couple of years ago where like you have a little bit of backing, you have some people that are like-minded, but I also try to find that, instead of just like digging our heels in and arguing, because this is such a divisive time, what is your best method of trying to literally reach across and talk to other people and listen? Obviously listening is there, but I mean, what are your best methods? Because I'm thinking, I'd like to learn from this.
I love it. It's something I'm learning every day. Like, that's the reality of it too. And it's funny for me because I I have one foot in like movement building work, which is really my background, my bread and butter. What drives me is like this very progressive like space of organizing and leading social movements. And then now I have another foot in governance, which governance is more bureaucratic. Governance takes more time. Governance has the dynamic of politics, which in my case lean right. You know, the legislature is still in the hands of the Republican Party. So, you know, what a really dynamic like and complicated dichotomy to navigate every day. And I have to tell you, every day is a fight. Like, and my colleagues know this about me. Like, I am very authentic in who I am, and they, you know, I get made fun of because of it in a joking way with my colleagues. But I mean, this past week in Tallahassee, our first week of session, you know, every committee meeting there was something I had to vote down, and something I had to question, something I had to like make points at. And it can be wearing on you.
Yeah.
You have to have resilience. That's the first thing I'll say is anyone who, you know, is in a place of service or a place of advocacy to really ground yourself in how resilient you are, but try to find moments of self-care to continue to rebuild your resilience, because you will get drained. And
I mean, thank goodness you're doing it, because it's definitely not something that I could do.
I mean, I don't know yet how to practice the best self-care. Like, I'm still figuring it out myself. I mean, because it is a constant challenge of like your values, and I understand why some Democrats like, you know, don't want to keep fighting, like, and so I just, again, that's why the resilience piece is so important, to ground yourself in why do you care. And for me, I think about my working class family. I think of my immigrant family, and they needed fighters. And there's families like mine across the state who need fighters, and that's what motivates me every day to keep doing it. But when you're talking to folks who disagree with you, we mentioned empathy. I cannot stress the importance of empathy. Like, I try to put myself in their shoes and really try to understand where they're coming from. We might disagree in a committee meeting or on the House floor, but after that, I'll come up and I'll shake your hand. You know, and I'll say good debate, or, you know, I'm sorry if I was, you know, too direct on that. You know, I try really hard to respect the process, and I think that as a legislator, we try really hard to separate the idea, the policy idea, from the person, and so we can still respect and have empathy for the person, even if we think they have bad ideas. So I take that approach with everyone. And one local example is so interesting. 2 people who used to protest the Planned Parenthood that I worked at emailed me, and apparently they emailed all legislators sending out meetings. And I saw it. I know exactly who they are. Right. Like we've been on the picket line opposing sides for years. Yeah. And I accepted the meeting, and I said, sure, like, come by our office, and we're not going to agree on abortion, but come by the office. And they actually filmed me during our meeting, which was interesting. But I'm a open, transparent person, and it was like a 40-minute meeting about abortion. And, you know, again, we did not agree on abortion, but I tried to find common ground on other issues. And at the very least, you know, we left with a sense of love for one another. I mean, it's so unique, you know, but she even sent me a card, like, you know, of course, saying, like, I disagree with you on this point, but, you know, I'm really grateful that you opened up your heart to me. And I second that. Like, I think that's really special. And, you know, to do our best to keep, not deny ourselves those experiences, and kind of approach this work with clear eyes and a full heart. I like to think that there's a light at the end of that tunnel.
Well, you're definitely resilient. But it is the beginning of that uphill battle for you. So we are all here supporting you, though. You have a lot of supporters.
Well, and that's the game changer for me, too. I have to tell you, like, when, you know, one other example, I made the decision back in December to not attend this event hosted by a special interest group called Associate University of Florida, AIF. AIF is like, they are a very powerful organization. They tend to they call all the shots, you know, in the building and on the campaign trail. And I post them on a few issues that are like non-negotiables for me. We have some things in common, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to go to any of their events. I just refuse to. And so I publicly made that decision and got some backlash from it, even from members of my own party. And it was tough. I mean, I had like an almost cry moment in my office because it was so stressful. But then I look out the window and I'm like, that's who I'm fighting for. It's the folks out there who have no idea what's happening in these walls, but they do know that special interests have too much power. They do know that I ran on a campaign of being authentic and being for the people. And they're going to want me to do this. They're going to want me to do this well. And I actually sent out like an email to our constituents letting them know my decision to not go to this event. And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. And so, saying that you have our back means a lot, because that is what keeps me focused on the values that we campaigned on and the values that I embrace every day. It helps hold myself accountable, to making those right decisions.
Absolutely. I always encourage people, I'm like, you guys need to reach out to your, Congress, to Senate, get on the phones, or even send an email, whatever. And they're like, oh, it doesn't matter. They don't actually pick up.
Totally matters.
And I said, it does matter. And then I'll have friends who are like in Boston, right? They're like, well, Elizabeth Warren's our senator, so it doesn't matter. I said, it does matter, because if she gets positive reinforcement, it's equally as important.
So
and
true.
then she can also say, hey, I'm getting positive reinforcement.
That is such a good point.
And people never want to call when they think, oh, well, she's voting the way I would want her to, so I don't need to let her know.
They tend to call only when it's like negative, right?
Yes. And I was always one of those, well, I'm going to write on the airline like, hey, this flight attendant was amazing, blah, 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 because I'll do the negative write-up, but I'm really fair about if somebody goes above and beyond. I feel like they even more so should be honored, because they're the ones that are always overlooked,
Absolutely.
And so I always encourage people, they need to hear from you, whether it's now you have a million outlets, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, there's so many outlets.
Easy.
Even just a little helps, I would imagine.
Oh my gosh, I love it when people tweet at us, like supportive words. Yeah, oh my gosh, and I always, I retweet it, I tweet back. I mean, it absolutely, tells me that I'm doing a good job. And so, legislators are watching that. All your government officials are watching that. So it's good to engage on every level.
That's what I was hoping. All right, and so let's talk a little bit about Florida. There's so many things to fix. Learning how to vote properly, actually go to the voting and do count, some basics, but we can't fix that today. But what are your what is your top main concern for Florida? And what do you
I love it. I think one of the biggest crises we're in right now is affordable housing. So we have a huge affordable housing shortage in Florida. We have a giant gap in rent and the cost of rent when you look at other regions and other states.
Compared to cost of living, too.
You got it. I mean, Orlando, as an example, compares to Los Angeles when it comes to the amount of affordable options for rent. I mean, it's horrific. So we've been really intentional in providing a toolkit to solve this problem, fighting for affordable trust fund dollars to stay in the Sadowski Fund. This is a fund that was created to really support the investment in affordable housing, and it keeps getting rated every year. So we're fighting to protect that, but also, in addition to complement that effort, we sponsored legislation to define tiny homes in Florida law. And we did a repealer on rent control, which would basically give more flexibility for rent control to our local government. If they wanted to put things in place, they'd have more flexibility to do that. Because we know that there's a growing renter community in our state, especially in District 47. And we want to make sure that renters have a say in this work too. So affordable housing, by far, one of the biggest concerns we have, and something that we're fighting on multiple layers. It's an old problem, and we want to solve it with new ideas. Another big issue is mental health funding. Mental health funding is a big one in Florida. We rank on the bottom of the barrel when it comes to mental health, and we know whether it's the veterans who have PTSD, our public safety officers with trauma, students who are bullied, or students who are isolated, or students who turn to violence. We have so many reasons why we need to invest in mental health, and yet time and time again, the legislature does not meet up to the need. And so that's one of our priorities as well, to really make sure that no matter how old you are, you have access to a really, really effective and personalized mental health services.
Absolutely. Well, actually, my first few podcasts of this season was all on mental health.
No way.
Yeah. Well, we start off with the New Year type of, wellness. But also, we talked a lot about mental health in the first few podcasts, and I think it's so important. And so, especially of people of color, it's something that's a stigma.
We don't talk about a lot.
We don't talk about that. Or no, you're crazy if you're going to go to a therapist or something. And that's something that, I personally definitely I have a therapist, but also that I want to encourage other people to, open up and seek the help they need. But back to the affordable housing, can you maybe speak a little bit so that, 'cause people hear these buzzwords, they hear these terms and they don't,
let's unpack
can you maybe tell people what the downside is for like the community and for Central Florida or all of Florida?
So to give you some more concrete examples, right now for Florida, in Orlando, if you want to live in a 1-bedroom apartment, you have to work anywhere from 2 to 3 minimum wage jobs. And we know that in our region, minimum wage jobs are pretty common. I mean, even with my PhD program, when I get my PhD at UCF, I was collecting surveys at the Central Links bus station, and we were asking demographic questions. Income was one of them. And I mean, this is a random sampling, of course, of folks at the bus stop, but you get a feeling for the lived experiences of Floridians and Central Floridians, and it's hard. And so you have folks that are struggling to find housing. You have folks that came from Puerto Rico to Central Florida, who are, their crisis made the situation even more dire for everyone. But the fact that we never could fully house these families in a meaningful way is a reflection of a larger systematic problem that we have. In the last 3-4 years, we've really embraced what's called the housing first model, which is all designed to get a homeless individual into a home. And once we get them into a home, we can then provide wraparound services where they can have efficacy again. But we can't do that when there's not enough homes. And the wait lists for affordable housing that we do have, they are long. And what that means is that there's going to be folks who are going to live in our streets, folks who live in our shelters, folks with children who are going to live out of their cars. You have bus stops that are at motels and extended stay hotels because that's where kids are sleeping. I mean, you see it every day. And these are our efforts to solve this crisis. Like I said, for us, it takes shape in 3 main ways, but in particular, the Sadowski housing trust funds have to be protected, and we need to put money back in there. And this is money that goes towards homes and rent. And local governments can then decide how to utilize it. But when that gets rated, then local governments are going to struggle to be able to solve this crisis. And like I said, we've also filed legislation, House Bill 801, to define tiny homes, because my thought is that we have more tiny homes as an option. You can build tiny home communities that are more low cost. You can use it as a housing first model to solve homelessness and be a good alternative for folks who maybe don't want to live in like a mobile park environment, but a tiny home provides you with a foundation. A tiny home can be built to withstand hurricane, weather climates. Exactly. So my hope is that by offering these new ideas, like I said, we have rent control on the table. We also have a renter bill of rights that's been filed, because renters are exploited, and especially if they speak a different language. And so we want to do our part to make sure that renters are protected, in the full platform of what is this affordable housing crisis and how can we solve it.
And what's been one of the most surprising things? I know you just took office in November, but what has been one of the most surprising things since that time, even though it's been kind of short? There's so much that happens on a daily basis in our world.
I think, so I've always been someone who works really hard. Like I am you could probably call me a workaholic, like absolutely. And it's only because to our earlier point, like my parents were always working. We only went on 2 vacations when I was a kid. And then when my mom passed away, work became one of my numbing mechanisms with the trauma. And so now it's like, though it doesn't serve that purpose anymore, it's like my habits have been already established, so it's hard to break them. And so I've always been a hard worker, but let me tell you, this workload is wild. Like we're in the building in Tallahassee till midnight. Like it is unbelievable just how early the days start and how late they go if you're doing it right. Like you're just in that building. And so I think that surprised me, is just the fact that it's like a train that will leave you behind. And so you have to keep up with it. And the other part too that's been really surprising, maybe not so surprising because I was hoping this would be the case, but it is pretty collegial. I mean, we hear about a lot of the partisan divide, in the media, and there's absolutely moments where, you're going to be frustrated by the stance your colleagues take, but it's pretty collegial. You can kind of even folks who were probably aggressively campaigning against you during the campaign cycle, you can walk up to them and say hi, and try and build a relationship with them. And I'm really grateful for that, because I think that at the end of the day, the people of Florida need us to get work done together. And if I can have empathy, and if I can, tell a member that I like that bill, or you did a good job on the presentation, thank you for asking that question. Like, if I can be really intentional in showing up and being collegial, it's really heartwarming to get the same reaction back.
Yeah, that's very hopeful. That's very hopeful, because you wonder, you see the cameras are on, and everyone's so nasty and angry, but you do hope that, my husband and I, we talk politics a lot, and we talk about issues, and we're like, we're trying to be more understanding as well, because at the end of the day, we're like, we're hoping we all want the same things. We want to be happy. We want to have a good life for our families and ourselves. We want to be healthy. And, even if you have very, very different ideas or very, very different stances, at the end of the day, we do all want the same thing, right?
Totally,
so if we can at least find some commonality, that does help.
Absolutely.
But it is challenging. So
I'm always really grateful because again, I have such strong values in the legislature. When I can vote for a Republican bill, that feels good, because if I'm voting for it, that means it's fine. Like, because I do my research, and I'm really, I reach out to stakeholders. So I try really hard to make sure that my decision is going to be a good one. Mm-hmm. And when I can tell a Republican colleague, like, that's a good bill, like, thank you for doing it. Maybe there's areas of improvement, but overall it's good. Like, that's exciting, and I hope that they can do the same for me too. And actually, this past week, I had an appropriations request for opening up a health center in Buffalo. And my first ever bill presentation, it went really well. And not only was it unanimous that people have supported it, but one of my Republican colleagues, Representative Renee Placencia, actually expressed words of support.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yes, and I was
take
so
the wins.
I was so yes, take the wins, but I was just so grateful, right? So much gratitude, because he doesn't have to do that, and we disagree on a lot of other issues. The fact that we could express the solidarity with one another on an important issue was really meaningful to me, and I really honor that.
Let's talk a little bit more about your background, because I find it so fascinating that you did grow up here in Central Florida, and your dad was like literally the coast, Kennedy, and also Disney. I mean, so Orlando.
It's so Orlando. Oh my gosh, like the polar opposites,
polar
right?
Opposites, but so Orlando.
Funny,
yeah. So, what was it like for you growing up in Orlando?
I mean, I love Orlando. I assume that you feel the same, because
I'm still here.
Yeah, exactly. And there was never any doubt in my mind that I would leave Orlando. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like Orlando has really built me to who I am today. I mean, and growing up in this community was good on a lot of levels. I mean, one is that, yes, we were probably the only Iranian-American in a lot of spaces, but it was still very diverse. Mm-hmm. And so when I was at University High School, as an example, it was, always really refreshing, because there was not many Iranian-Americans, but there were tons of Latinos and African-Americans and folks with Caribbean background. And, it was just such a diverse environment where it never really, I didn't question that. Like, diversity felt natural, that felt expected. And that doesn't happen in every community. I also think that Orlando is such a young place to call home, that it's still malleable. Mm-hmm. Like, we can have an impact on it. We can shape it, like you're doing with this podcast, right? Like,
we hope.
Yes, there's an opportunity to like mold it still, and I'm so excited about that, because it's going to be the next generation that really defines what this city looks and feels like, and to be a part of that, it is something really special. And we grew up in like super humble beginnings. I mean, my sister and I, we shared a room until we were both 13 years old. So we like are very close, but our house was really small, and we had a backyard we'd always play in, and we would celebrate Iranian holidays and things like that. And I'm excited because we're actually hosting the first ever Persian New Year party in Tallahassee.
Oh.
On March 28th.
Okay.
And I mean, the buzz has been so sweet. Like, I even had a lobbyist who came by my office just to tell me that her grandfather is Persian, and she's so excited this is happening. It's going to be there.
Yeah.
So the fact, and she was so funny about it. She was like, I know I don't look Persian, but it's really special to me. And I was like, that's amazing. And so the fact that people who don't often get the chance to connect with that part of their identity, feel welcome to do it. Yes. It makes it so special. And so again, growing up in Orlando, I think was really foundational for me because there's always been two constants in my life, right? One is my Iranian-American identity, and the other is that I'm Orlando native, and this is my hometown. And when you have those major parts of your life defined for you at an early age, it does make a lot of the other parts of your evolution, I think, easier because you have that foundation. And so everything else will kind of like wrap around it over time, and you're still going to change with age, but at the very least, like those two truths really are like ring true for me.
Yeah, well, I feel like your identity started quite early.
Yes,
You're very strong in your identity.
Totally.
I'd want to hear more about all the traditions because we do talk a lot about culture on this podcast.
Absolutely.
So tell me more about all the traditions in your household.
I'd love to. So many. Okay, so I will talk about the Persian New Year, but first a few other traditions. So one in particular comes to mind is when if you have family of friends who are leaving your home and traveling somewhere far, we will get a glass or bowl of water and actually throw the water after your car. Oh. And it's like a symbol of like safe travels. And so that's something I always did as a kid was, whenever family was leaving, we would always like grab cups of water and like be ready to
Were the neighbors like,
it.
oh, there they are throwing water at someone again.
Water again. Yeah, they were so wasteful. Yeah, we would always do that though. There's also a part of Persian culture, it's really funny. It's called taruf. So taruf is the act of saying no when I really mean like yes. Okay. And so as an example, like paying for the bill after dinner. Like so if you and I were getting dinner together, like and you were like, I'm gonna pay, and I'm like, no, don't pay. I'll keep saying it like 3 times. Really, like I do want you to pay. Right. But it's like the act of pretending like I don't want you to pay. And so a lot of times we'll say taruf nakwa, which means don't taruf, like stop it, But it's such a funny part of Persian culture is like it's a very polite culture, and you're supposed to, say like, no, I got it. Don't worry about it. Don't really like you do want that person to pay. And it's just like part of the culture dynamics. It's so funny and probably not really healthy either. But that brings to the Persian New Year, which is like a big deal. Millions of people celebrate what's called Nowruz, which means new day in Farsi. And Nowruz is celebrated by Iranians and non-Iranians around the world. And there's 3 main parts to the holiday, but at the end of the day, it's the Persian New Year, which falls on the spring equinox. Okay. Yeah, so it's coming up. Yeah. Usually around March 20th, 21st. And a lot of other traditions within it. So in particular, we jump over fire. Ooh. Yes. I like that. I know. I have all my students jump over fire on March 28th. You should. It's called Chahar Shimbasuri. It's one of the pieces of Nowruz. Okay. And we jump over fire to give the fire our sickness, and take its red, its energy, and its health. That. Yeah. So it's a. So like, how big is the fire? So it kind of depends where you are. So I'll tell you, in Central Florida, there's usually a big Chahar Shimbasuri party in Sanford. Okay. Yeah, and so the fires are like decently big. Wow. It's kind of like maybe like a foot by foot, base. And so it's funny. When we do them at our house, we do a little bit smaller, but we get a little generous with the lighter fluid. So it gets a little intense. Is there like on standby with fire extinguishers? Like, yes, always. Are there any? Safety is a priority, always. And it's funny because my sister and I, well, in Iran there are. We have yet to have any accidents, but in Iran they have huge bonfires, and sometimes people are jumping at the same time. Like flipping. Yeah, oh my God, it's super intense. And so we do an Nowruz party, my sister and I, we usually do one every year. And invite all of our friends. It's such a cool collection because it's not many Iranians, and to be honest. There's nothing else going on at the end of March. It's like, let's party. Anytime party is good. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool to teach your culture to others, right? Yes, absolutely. So cool, just like the Dragon Parade. Yes. Like, it's amazing to do. And so that's one part of the holiday. The actual day of Nowruz, there are New Year's Eve traditions. Okay. And so part of the holiday is creating what's called a Hafseen display, which you can kind of consider to be like your Christmas tree in a way. Right? Your Christmas trees are very ornate, they're symbolic. Our Hafseen display has 7 different items that all start with the letter in Farsi of Seen, and each item represents something. Okay. And so everything's super symbolic. And it changes every year? Well, it's you have to do you redo it every year, but it's 7 same items. Okay. Yeah. So you have apple, you have a mirror, you have coins to represent like wealth and, you know, a bountiful new year. I mean, everything has its own symbolism to it.
Yeah.
You color eggs, kind of like Easter.
Okay.
And you eat one half of the egg on New Year's Eve and the other half on New Year's Day. You grow.
And why do you do half and half?
Kind of speak to fertility and close off the year, I guess.
Okay.
But the reason why it's an egg is like it's springtime and fertility and things like that. Another part that like ties into spring is you actually grow lentil seeds into. At Farsi it's called sabzi, but basically it's like the lentil seeds will sprout and be maybe like 2-3 inches high, and you light a candle on New Year's Eve, and the candle burns through the night. And then 13 days after Nowruz, you go to a park, and it's called Sisa Badar. That's like the conclusion of everything. Okay. And you have a picnic with your friends. You're just outside enjoying the springtime, and you'll actually toss the sabzi into the water. Oh. And usually you prefer it should be a river, but you throw it into the water again as a way of saying goodbye to the past year and hello to the new year.
I love that.
Yeah, a lot of cool traditions.
Yes.
So we're going to do a party in the Capitol.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I wish
party
I could
like
be there.
a Persian.
I have to ask about the food because this is one of my plans actually for how we can all get together, because I feel like everybody loves food. So if like all the parties had a potluck and everyone shared each other's food,
I'm about it.
There's like major empathy going on with food.
I'm about it.
This is always my plan. I'm like, we just need a giant world potluck and everyone would get along.
I'm with you. It's one reason why we're doing the Persian party in the Capitol is that we're going to have Persian food. And our hope is that the food attracts enough people to, want to learn about Persian
There'll be food
culture.
there. Everyone shows
up. Exactly. So Persian food it's funny. It's not really spicy. It's more sour.
Okay.
Sour is like a big part
like
of Persian cuisine. You got it.
Okay.
And lemon limey. A lot of just pickled.
Okay.
Like things are pickled a lot. So there's vinegar too. And rice is absolutely a staple. Okay. Always have rice. There's a part of the rice that we fry that's crunchy. It's called tagi.
Okay.
So
Every culture seems to have that crunchy rice part.
The best part of rice. I swear, it's the best. That's like such a weakness for me. We have, and yogurt is a big piece of. Okay. I mean, I can't even tell you, yogurt can be used in like so many different. There's even yogurt soup. Like it's so funny how common yogurt is in Persian diets. And there's always hot tea. Chai is a big part of the Persian diet. Very sweet tea. You'll have Iranians will put literally a cube of sugar like in their teeth and drink the tea through it. Like it's super sweet.
So a little tea with their sugar.
Exactly.
With their sugar cubes.
No, that's exactly what it is. So yeah, it's and it's very meat heavy too. I mean, kebab is a big part of Persian diet along with oven baked chicken. But I'm actually vegetarian. Oh. And so when I went back to Iran, my first time in Iran was to actually bring our mom's ashes there in 2005. And then we went back 2 more times. And during that time, I became a vegetarian. And so it was so funny to go back to Iran. Had to explain to our family that
they're like, I don't understand.
Oh my God, they were so confused. It was so sweet. They kept bringing us, one moment they brought us bologna, which I know isn't really meat, but it still is,
Yeah.
And so it took them 3 times to like.
Oh. They thought you were doing the, what's it? No, I can't remember.
Oh, taruf.
No,
taruf.
I don't really want the bologna.
No, literally, I can't eat it. Literally, I can't. I'm not tarufing right now. Yeah, that's so funny. It's so funny. But now my sister and I, she's vegan, I'm vegetarian, and so, I still, like at the Persian New Year party, we'll have meat for folks. I want folks to get that experience of the full Persian cuisine. But actually, I do have a really good friend here who she makes Persian vegan food. It's pretty good. Ah. Yeah, so it's out there. But the meat's a pretty big part of the diet as it stands now.
I'm sure. Oh my gosh. Well, now we're getting hungry.
Sure am.
So, I know you don't have a lot of time. So, is there anything else you want to talk about in terms of like what's to look ahead or anything you want our listeners to be doing actively? Because we all want to be a part of the process. You don't have to stay up to midnight every night and do all the work.
So
I feel like we are all in it with you. We're in Florida.
Absolutely. We're in this together.
What can we be doing?
That's exactly what I was going to lift up was, ways to get involved. And you kind of already touched on a lot of it, to be honest. I mean, get to know your elected officials, hold them accountable, share with them ideas. I want everyone to know that they are an expert on something, right? Like I think many of us, we look at politics and we're like, oh, that's just out of reach, or it's too complicated, or I don't know numbers. And it's like, you don't have to know any of that. Like it is so accessible to you, and you are good at something, and you might be an expert in dance. And what that means is that you know the value of dance, you know that it deserves to be funded, and now you can advocate for arts funding. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
the personal is political, so everything's connected to a policy idea or a funding request. And so to really encourage folks to trust themselves to be masters. And I'll tell you, there are people that, you know, when I can't know everything, so I lean on people who are experts in different areas. And so you will evolve to become a person of deep value for that lawmaker or that city official, what have you. And of course, you know, you can follow your elected officials on any platform, and to do that, to keep tabs on them, but also consider running for office one day yourself. And we need more
Yeah, we
people
hear that all
of
the
color.
time.
We need more people of color.
Like,
We
you
need
don't
more
think
young
you can
people.
run? You can.
You can. I mean, one reason why I ran for office in the first place was I wanted to be a model for others, because I knew that if a young woman of color, daughter of immigrants with a funny last name, a progressive, if I could win in Orlando and win big, then why should anyone else try it? You know, and so I feel pretty firmly that, you know, part of our mission in this work is to set a trail for others to follow, and that's one reason why I encourage everyone to run for office and to not take themselves for granted.
Yeah, I love it. Your energy is definitely contagious, and I hope it's coming across to everyone, because you're right. I feel like a lot of people are scared to engage.
Yeah.
They think that they're out of their depth and they just don't know enough. But
Totally.
like you said, just get involved in small ways, because it
Yes.
affects, you know, people think, oh, well, it doesn't involve me. I'm like, you live
It
here, it does involve you.
Absolutely.
You know?
And there's so, to your point, so many small ways. I mean, I encourage folks to get even different listservs, different emails, podcasts. I mean, there's so many cool ways for you to keep yourself informed in kind of like a low effort way, because I know we're busy too. I mean, that's
Yes.
reality too for many immigrants, is that we're busy people. And sometimes we're taking care of our seniors and of our children, right? I mean, generationally, so many responsibilities. But so there are easier ways for you to still be plugged in and engaged. But you know, again, trust yourself to dive deep into the nuance, dive deep into the gray, and know that you are needed in those spaces.
Yes, well, you're doing a fantastic job, and I know it's just getting started
Thank
for you,
you.
but we are, you know, like I said, we all really support you, and you know, this is your first time here at the Wallam Temple, but
So
being able to
cool.
walk around, you had people coming up to you that know
Oh, it's
you,
so
and we're really
sweet.
excited to,
Well,
to
and
see you and meet you.
I know in my bones that I am the sum of those around me. Like, I am nothing without community. So thank you for opening up your heart and,
of course.
and your work to
You're
me too.
welcome here anytime.
Thank you.
We'll talk again in a few months when we have the next thing on the
Yes.
docket, because we have so many other things to cover.
And
but
post-session, I love to come back and kind
Yes.
of talk about it.
yeah,
It'd
so
be
we
cool.
can say, okay, well, where are we at? Have
Yeah.
we made progress? You know, are
Totally.
you how was the party?
Can't wait.
I want to know how the
Can't
party
wait.
was. So I
Can't
know I don't want to
wait.
take up too much of your time. Anna, thank you so much for being on the podcast
an
and
honor.
talking to me. And you know, I hope all our listeners take everything you said to heart, because I know you're out there working for us, and so hopefully we could be good support for you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Culture Chat, and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please subscribe and rate my podcast. Feel free to leave me suggestions or send an email to mimi@culturechatpodcast.com, or follow me on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.